We have the celebration, commemoration of the 200th anniversary of the birth of Charles Darwin, who has admittedly impacted an entire civilization. Not just a generation, but an entire civilization toward naturalism. And in a previous program, I talked about publications, about propaganda, about year-long celebrations, about the fact that on February the 12th, 1809, a man was born, and he affected the entire world ultimately in what he had to say for various reasons. And in that program, I also informed you that Charles Darwin did not present original material. I informed you that he actually reached back to Enuma Elish, a religious document in Babylonian history, in the formation of the world and living systems by naturalistic decay of the gods of the heavens, Kingu and Tiamat at battle. I also referred to the fact that Anaximander, an ancient Greek, came up with the idea that life originated in the warm little pond of Charles Darwin, in the seas and the oceans, and ultimately developed through the fishes to what we have today. So the concept of Charles Darwin and its presentation is not original. I let you know that even the idea of natural selection did not come from Charles Darwin. That term was used by Erasmus Darwin, his grandfather. Survival of the fittest came from a naturalist, Herbert Spencer, and it is equated with Darwinism because it parallels the concept. Charles Darwin didn't come up with an original idea having to do with life as we know it, the origin of life. In fact, his bombshell book on the origin of species speaks nothing, addresses nothing, purports to nothing having to do with the origin of species and the origin of life. It gives no information, doesn't even define a species. Well, so Charles Darwin really is mimicking ideas. Why is he so popular? He's popular, as I mentioned in a previous telecast. His ideas came at the right time. We have Wallace, who came up with natural selection to produce evolutionary progression, and yet he is not the hero of the plot. He later in life, Wallace later in life, attributed all of the original information to an intelligent designer. But Charles Darwin did not, because in history at that point in time, we had a naturalistic fervor fomenting within the mind of man, wanting to shed itself and distance itself from a God to whom they would give an account. So Charles Darwin came along at the right time. But there is another reason why Charles Darwin is so popular and was from the beginning. And that is that Charles Darwin was extremely ill mentally. Entire books have been written in the medical community having to do with Charles Darwin and the phobias that totally engulfed him. Most people don't realize, but Charles Darwin could not go out alone. Charles Darwin required company. He was fearful of crowds, fearful of life, phobic in nature. As a grown man, he loved to fish. But he identified with the worms that he studied quite extensively, and he couldn't bring himself to harm a worm sufficiently to bait his hook. Literally, as a grown fisherman, the record shows that he had to get someone else to do the baiting for him. He didn't want to harm the worm. The man was extremely sick, intensively phobic. He was phobic especially in the areas having to do with order and structure, because his mind was chaotic. He was fearful in every area of his being. And that is not simply one man's opinion. Entire books and treatises and medical journals have addressed those problems that Charles Darwin had. In addition to that, the reason Charles Darwin is the hero of the evolutionary concept is that in his writhing discord and phobia, he identified with an entire universe writhing chaotically and ultimately producing the chaos that was within his own mind. Therefore, It's natural to be chaotic. Therefore, there are no moral stipulations. There are no absolutes, because the mind and the disposition of man is, according to that concept, the result of a chaotic universe materializing itself in the mind of Charles Darwin. And that is one reason his followers have had such identification with him. That is, the major scholars who defend him identify with him, and admittedly so, because they want no moral, religious, personal absolutes. They want to behave as they feel it right to behave. Charles Darwin is the hero. Yet he didn't come up with the term natural selection. There was a creationist by the name of Edward Blyth, who in 1835 published, and for 2 or 3 years, in the magazine of Natural History in 1835, 36, and 37, his article and articles appeared. He was a major scholar, but he attributed the variation that we see all to the genetic information that was already present in the organisms. Natural selection simply kept the kind pure and vital. In fact, the leading tenets of Darwin's work, the struggle for existence, variation, natural selection, and sexual selection, are all found in the work of Edward Blyth, a creationist and a naturalist who studied the order of the world. Now, Charles Darwin has a legacy. That legacy is being expressed even to the children of our generation. Not long ago, I picked up a little book in a fossil shop addressed to the children. Now, we're familiar with the geologic column for mature adults, supposedly exercising the idea that we originated from simple life forms. Yet, even in Science magazine, dedicated a special issue during this year of Darwin to Charles Darwin and origins. Science magazine offered no concept as to how natural chemical elements can provide a viable living system. They're blank walls, yet they're assumed to have occurred. Now we have the propagation not only for the college degree, but the propagation in the kindergarten to wear a kindergarten cap. Here, the dinosaurs saying, and by the way, I love dinosaurs, I dig them. The dinosaurs saying, this is my family tree and yours as well, beginning with the Precambrian era, the Paleozoic, and they teach those children to memorize the names, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, over 4.5 billion years, 1.5 billion years, 600 million, 440 million, 300, all the way down to a few thousand years ago. And he said, this is my family tree. The earth crust forms, bacteria and algae form. Yet, bacteria have a flagellum, a molecular motor run by protons with a rod as a drive shaft, a C ring and studs and stator, an S ring and M ring, and a rotor, a hook, filament, universal joint, propeller, bushings. It is a molecular entity, an engine, a motor that runs on protons. But these bacteria are some of the oldest forms in life according to evolutionary dogma, but they have that which would require incredible ingenuity to design. They have no explanation for that. One lame explanation in a science journal not long ago said, well, the bacterial flagellum was made from parts that already existed in another system that injects toxins into other bacteria and other life forms.